Hello, everyone. My name is Evan. I'm the Director of Organizing with 350 Mass, and I'm excited to welcome you all to a battery storage webinar, an opportunity to hear more from some of our partners about battery storage technology. Everyone who's gathered here gets a chance to learn a little bit about the technology, and we'll be able to do some discussion. Um, I just want to very briefly introduce our presenters before they spend a little bit of time introducing themselves. We have Becca and Kory from Greenlight America. This is an organization that supports grassroots groups like us with information about how energy projects are progressing through FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So offering us some tools, offering us some education, offering us some resources. And today is about helping us just learn a little bit about battery storage technology. So I'm going to pass it over to Becca and Kory. Thank you all for being here. I'll let y'all rock it.
All right, Kory's going to get us started while I share my screen.
Great. So while Becca's pulling that up, as Evan was saying, we're also so happy to be here with you all tonight. Thank you for giving us the time and space to have this conversation with you. Really, the focus of our presentation here tonight is what we're calling Energy Storage 101. We recognize many people already may be familiar with this technology, or maybe they know a little bit and still have some questions. So we're trying to, really provide information that can be, get everyone up to a baseline level of knowledge. And then, folks have maybe some more 201 questions. We can cover some of that in the Q&A, and we'll look forward to it. So Becca, you can go ahead to the next slide. The first is just a quick intro slide for us. Evan did introduce ourselves, but we'll take just a couple seconds to briefly say hello again. My name is Kory Stuer. I'm the Community Partnerships Manager at Greenlight America that covers the Northeast region. And my background is really in public health and health legislative advocacy. And so where I come into this conversation often, does come from that place of, recognizing how climate change is a health issue, but so are, pollution of the air and water and many other things, and how that impacts human health. And so I'll be happy to talk a little bit more about that later. But for now, I'll kick it over to Becca.
All right, and I'm Becca. I am the Northeast Regional Campaign Manager based in Framingham. I have run into a lot of you over the years. I've been in both climate and social justice organizing for almost 20 years, but the last 12 of them in Massachusetts. So you might know me. Before I came to Greenlight, I was the Massachusetts State Manager for Mothers Out Front. Before that, I was with Mass Alliance, which 350 is a member of, for 8 years. So I've been around and look forward to talking to you more.
Yeah, I'll also quickly say I failed to say I currently live in Portland, Maine, but I grew up in Chelmsford, Massachusetts. So it feels like being home with some good Bay Staters. All right, so just a quick little bit about Greenlight. As Evan said, we are a nonprofit organization. We were founded in 2023, really in recognition of the fact that we need to be building a lot more clean energy in this country. And there are a lot of issues coming up at the local level where good projects are being defeated, often by misinformation, often just by people who have ideological prejudice, and so are the ones who are showing up against, wind or other types of clean energy. And so really what we are about as an organization is empowering local communities who support clean energy to show up and make their voices heard when these key local decisions are being made. Um, and as we said, we're going to get into some intro to energy storage. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it back to Becca and she'll get us started.
Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about batteries. It's, of course, a more emerging technology than solar and wind. And I will say that, like I said, I've been doing this work for a long time. And when I came to Greenlight, batteries was the thing that I was like, I need to know what it is we're talking about and study a lot. So we're going to kind of start from the beginning. Like Kory said, we know some of you might have like different levels of knowledge already, and we'll get to the more complex stuff as we go along. So, what is it that we're talking about with batteries? This is typically what one of these battery facilities that we're talking about looks like. It looks kind of like, shipping containers. What is inside there are a whole bunch of, usually the most common type of batteries is lithium ion batteries. So it's a battery similar, very similar to what's in your cell phone or your computer. And there's just a whole bunch of them stacked up in there. And then there's also inside there an air conditioning system or an HVAC system, as well as some electronics monitoring what's happening. And the size of the facility, you know, the amount it can put out, you just have more containers as you see there. Um, so, you know, we know how batteries work, right? You're storing energy, you're pulling it off the grid, and then you're keeping it there until you need it. So why do you need these? Number one, I think it's really important to note that these are necessary to make a renewable energy system work. So when we're running off fossil fuels, obviously we all know the many, many downsides, but they already come in storable form, right? They're in solid form and we just hang on to them until we need the power and then we burn them. Whereas with renewables, the sun shines when it shines, the wind blows when it blows. And if your energy needs don't match up to when those electrons are available and you don't have any way to store them, then they are just discharged and wasted without being used. And so, in order for us to reach a point in our energy system where we're primarily using renewables, it's, you know, we have to be able to um, store those electrons until they're needed. So another thing, these batteries can be used in a couple different ways. One of them is to replace an emergency generator. So, you know, of course, when power goes out, if you're at a hospital or something, you know, the previous way of doing things would be that you had a, you know, gas fired or like gasoline fired or oil or whatever generator that you'd fire up, and you are able to use batteries instead of that. Um, you also, another way that batteries can be used is to balance supply and demand. So Kory's going to talk a little bit more about this, but basically on a lesser scale, using batteries to replace part of the need we have. So what we have right now is what's called peaker plants. When the demand is really high, we fire those up. They're usually fossil fuel, and you can use batteries in place of those. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So, just defining some terms, another thing that I was like, you know, when I came to Greenlight, I'm like, I use this term, the electric grid, as well, but I realized that it was kind of a vague concept in my head. So this is when we keep saying that, this is what we're talking about. So we're talking about, you know, the various places that power is generated, whether that's a fossil fuel facility, whether that's a renewable facility, and then all these wires that then bring those electrons to your house, your business, wherever, so that you can use them. And batteries can be put into this system in a variety of different places. So basically, the closer they are in this system to you, the more they benefit you. So, for example, if there is a problem in the grid, whether there's a bottleneck, whether something breaks, something goes wrong, and the battery is, for example, in this top place in the middle, the transmission substation, that battery is able to kick on and make up the difference for everything that is further down the system from that. Um, if the problem would happen between where you see the transmission substation and the distribution substation, then having a battery at the transmission substation is not going to be able to cover that. So having one at the distribution substation means that that battery is able to kind of fix the problem for everybody, you know, lower down than that. So the closer it gets to you, the more it's able to, number one, bring your energy costs down. Number two, kind of prevent blackouts, brownouts, other types of problems for you. As well as if it's in your community, then you're able to benefit in, you know, some economic ways like, you know, payment in lieu of taxes, like some of the other community benefits that are negotiated directly with the municipality where that battery is. And then, you know, down at the very bottom, you see that some larger organizations like like a hospital, like a large business, might choose to have a battery of their own. It's probably worth noting that, like, one thing that we have seen is, in some cases, data centers will choose to build a battery of their own. So we just want to be clear that, like, putting these batteries in does not have anything to do with data centers. It's not, the two do not go together necessarily. There are plenty of data centers that do not have these. There are many, many batteries that have nothing to do with data centers. And so those are two different things. And if anybody has questions about that, then when we get through the presentation, happy to clarify further. Kory.
Okay, so here's a map of the grid demand on ISO New England, which is our grid operator for us here in New England, um, from a couple months ago, April 14th. And you can see that demand is not static throughout the day, that overnight there's a big dip. It starts at midnight there on the left of the screen. And by the time people are starting to wake up by 5, 6 a.m., there's an increase in what's being demanded. People are turning on their coffee makers, turning on the TV to look at the news, and they're using more energy. But as people go to work, as people go to school, um, typically energy use will go down during the day. And so in the middle of the day tends to be when energy demand is lowest. And it also happens to be when it's therefore the cheapest to often produce energy. But when people get out of school, they start leaving work. And around 4 or 5 o'clock, they start getting home. There's a rapid increase in the amount of energy that's being used. And so in the evening is when typically on almost any given day, you're going to see a huge peak in the amount of energy that's being used. And this map right here is sometimes known as the duck curve. And so you kind of see this little curve that looks like maybe the back of a duck in its head or something. And the grid operator really has to make sure that they can produce exactly the amount of energy that's needed at every point along that blue line. And so in that time when energy demand is really ramping up, it gets more difficult. That's where batteries come in. So um, for example, when used with solar, they can charge during the day when solar is very strong and demand is lower. With wind, that might happen, in the evening when wind is strongest. But then these batteries can be instantaneously deployed in the evening when energy demand is highest, but when solar and wind aren't as strong of energy sources. And so by doing this, we can take those electrons and use them when we need them most. And also we can do that at a cheaper level. If you go to the next slide, Becca, um, as I said, this really enables renewable energy. For example, I think it's fascinating that a huge amount, 3,400 gigawatt hours is a hard thing to conceptualize, but that's beyond a huge amount of energy. But California had to curtail that a couple of years ago because basically it wasn't being produced at the right time. They couldn't store it. So they had all this capacity for renewables that just was going wasted. Batteries can store that and make sure it doesn't get wasted. Additionally, as I was saying, it lowers energy prices. Basically, even if there are some batteries that don't charge directly from renewables, they charge from the grid, they can charge when it's at the cheapest possible level. So that way, when more energy is demanded, they can have that cheap energy that's available rather than having to have the most expensive energy. And that's it for that slide.
I would also say just two things. Number one, I saw for the 3,400 gigawatt hours that's enough to power 500,000 homes for the year. So, like, that is a ton of energy. So yes. So I have a couple of examples of this, and, like, thank you to Citizens Climate Lobby. One of their volunteers, I saw him present these, and then he's like, "You can have them." So here's an example from last year. There was a day in New York State where it was just, like, epically hot, breaking all the records. So you can see here the price of energy, and I don't worry about if you don't know what the marginal cost means of energy. Not really important to go into. You know what higher and lower cost means, and that's the important part of this example, which is 10 o'clock in the morning before it really got hot. That cost was 110 89, and then by 3:40 they were up to 582, and then they were close to 2,000 dollars for the same amount of energy by 6 p.m. And so, what was one of the problems here? Well, New York State happens to have a bottleneck on their grid that is, between kind of the western and northern parts of the state where there's a lot of energy production going on, and that southeastern part, which is, of course, where New York City is. Um, the grid is old. It wasn't built for the ways that we use energy or the demands that we have on it. So it is not able to move the volume of energy that is needed when this peak demand hits. And so basically, everybody who was kind of downstream in the grid of that bottleneck was seeing their prices in particular really skyrocket. And so it's a little bit hard to see, but you can see that like downstate, down by New York City, that the price was going even higher. And so these folks in particular were paying extra high prices. Had you had more batteries that were closer to where the energy was needed than that bottleneck, then you wouldn't have seen this happen. And how do I know that? Oh, here. How do I know that? We'll go back to the other one. I don't know. It got out of order. So this is an example from Texas. So this is 3 Augusts in a row, and you see those price spikes happening. So as in the New York, when it's getting really hot, you see the price of energy going up. And as you'll notice, within a 2 year span here, that's going way down. And you see the average cost of energy for the month dropping from almost $200 down to $35. Um, why is that? Well, within that 2 year period, this was the increase in deployment of batteries across the state of Texas. And they were able to bring that cost down by, like we said at the beginning, charging up at the times when the energy is cheapest and then deploying that energy when the other option would be to turn on these peaker plants, which are typically fossil fuel plants and which are the most expensive way that we generate energy. So it was able to be both cleaner and cheaper. And then I will back up because apparently this got out of order somehow. This is just, showing that we're going to see more and more of these peaks as we electrify. So electrification is a good thing. You guys have probably been involved when I was with Mothers Out Front. 350 was involved. So I know that you have about, building electrification. That's a way to reduce our use of fossil fuels. Electric cars is a way to kind of get fossil fuels out of the transportation sector. But it's going to increase the demands on our grid. And so this ability to reduce those spikes is going to become even more. Stephen, is your question clarifying, or is it?
It's about this chart.
Yep.
So you're showing all other winter demand, building electrification and EV demand, and yet the highest new impact on the grid is data centers. So why isn't that on the chart? Or can you explain that? Or
So it's not on the chart. I did because I didn't make the chart. Also,
it's reasonable.
I do not know the answer to that. Obviously, data centers will make, this go even higher, as well as like other types of technologies and development coming online. Like I said, we we decouple kind of like the batteries from the data centers. Like obviously there are a lot of problematic things about data centers. When we're talking about this, it's more like, we're going to, I mean, Greenlight Greenlight's position is the any data center that ends up being built is going to have to get electricity somehow, and we would rather that be through clean energy. I think personally, we are all, no to data centers. Greenlight just isn't involved in the data center fight at all. We're more like, okay, whatever energy needs that we have, we would like them to be clean, and we would like them to operate as well as possible. So I guess this is to say that like there's probably numerous other things that's going to make our demand go even higher than this, and it just is even more of a reason for us to make sure that our grid can handle that and handle it in a clean way. So I am going to answer a few of the questions that often come up. I will note that, you know, as with solar and wind, we see a lot of misinformation, largely originating from fossil fuel companies, but then, you know, dispersed to some of our friends and neighbors who have the best of intentions, but truly believe, you know, the things that they've heard from these folks. So just talking about some of the facts. Batteries do not, you know, during their normal operation, they're not burning any fuel, they do not consume any water, and they do not emit any pollution. And even in the event of an emergency, it is not the same as having like a peaker plant, a fossil fuel plant, where the air pollution just kind of hangs there. It quickly disperses. And as I'll talk a little bit more about, it, you know, in the event of an emergency, it is similar to like your neighbor's house being on fire. It is not similar to Chernobyl, which is the picture that a lot of these folks will paint for you. There's a very strict fire code, and the Massachusetts fire code goes even further than the national. So there is a national fire code. I recently found out that apparently the National Fire Protection Association is based in Quincy. So apparently, like the National Fire Code was written here as well. But then statewide, we have some additional things on top that these facilities have to comply with. They're, you know, have extensive and overlapping safety equipment that has to be in it. There's a few things like battery management systems is like, you know, if your phone or your computer is in direct sunlight and then it's like too hot shutting down, that's a battery management system. So they have these. They also have fuses and circuit breakers like in your house. If you try to turn on every appliance that you own at the same time and your wires are not thrilled with you and they're just like, nope, going to shut down. So there are many of these things to prevent a problem before it happens. They have monitoring anything properly, like this fan isn't spinning right, like I don't know, the like temperature here doesn't look quite right. That is able to be seen right away, and they will typically shut down the battery system until somebody's able to go deal with it. So these fire codes being written and these safety systems have resulted just within the last 8 years in a 97% reduction in the rate of failures and fires. So this is happening very rarely. So what happens in that very rare instance? We have been working on a proposal in Revere. There's a battery facility proposed there that would be able to power about 40,000 homes. And this was a city council meeting. If you look closely, you can actually see me in this video because I was there and I heard some of the Revere firefighters who've done a whole lot of training have, you know, gone out west to do, you know, to talk to some folks who have been at battery facilities where there were problems before there was a fire code, and they're talking to the Revere City Council, answering some of their questions. And I figure, you know, if you're talking about that, you know, very rare instance, they're the best messengers. So this is about 2 minutes long, and they can answer some of your questions. Maybe. Here we go.
The smoke and gases that are produced by these fires are the same as any other fire that we handle. And many people don't realize when there's just a building fire or a house fire, all kinds of hazardous materials come out of those fires these days. Everything's plastic, everything's chemicals. So we're used to dealing with this. We've been dealing with this for a long time.
When we fight these fires, these batteries catch fire. You know, when you ever see a fire, you put the water on the fire, correct? We all know that. Not this way. When you get these batteries catch fire, we start protecting exposures and trying to bank the smoke down. That smoke is toxic, just like a house fire, just regular house fire. The metals, not the metals that they say are in there, not on these lithium-ion batteries. The only time we hit fire, we put the water on the battery units itself, is if we start to notice that the battery's starting to take off. Like, so you got each unit. So this say this is a unit. You're gonna have 4 units inside, 4 batteries inside a unit. If this starts catching fire, you got to worry about the next one. All right? You put water on it, you could potentially cause that. Our tactics are not that. We're going to surround the areas, protect exposures, make sure smoke does not go to the neighbor. We're going to bank it down as much as possible until it burns out. And that's the cleanest way of doing it. Okay?
Foam basically is a smothering agent, and it has different properties, but it stops the chemical chain reaction. And so we don't really use that for these type of fires. What's prescribed for these fires is to let them burn out and just protect the exposures. If need be to put water on it, it's for cooling when something does start to run away.
Now, if we end up hitting these units, if we have to put water on these battery units, we're going to do what we always do. We're going to kick into it. Our tactics change. Hazardous materials. Like if you have a rollover at Copeland Circle or Brown Circle and the fuel comes out, what do you think we do? Right away, we go to the sewers. We dike, we divert, we use catch basins to stop that gasoline from going into the waters. You know, the marshland over there.
All right. Kory, I believe it is you now.
Yes, indeed. So Becca's mentioned a few times, peaker plants, and these are the energy sources that when that demand peaks, when there's that spike that the grid operator maybe wasn't expecting or goes far beyond what they have as part of their normal just base load of generation, they turn on what are usually their oldest and most expensive energy producing things in their arsenal. And so often in the New England area, these actually are powered by oil. A lot of places they're powered by gas, but in New England, because we use so much liquid natural gas to heat people's homes, it ends up being oil that gets used for a lot of these. And they're always the most polluting, the most expensive way that we produce energy. They tend to be located in, what we'll term environmental justice communities and communities that haven't had as much power to push back on these dirty, polluting energy sources, and are hugely linked to a lot of the health outcomes that we see from air pollution. And we can go right on to the next slide to talk a little bit more about that air pollution. So I always like to emphasize for people, we hear a lot, of politicians, of, people in power that are talking about violent crime, and we need to address that. But when we look at the scale about the amount of harm and deaths and, disease that we face from something like air pollution, it dwarfs astronomically. The amount that we would see from anything like that. Across the country, it's 135,000 early deaths from air pollution each year. We think about things like heart disease, lung cancer, stroke, COPD. That is absolutely being contributed to by some of these stationary pollution sources. And in Massachusetts specifically, they estimate that air pollution is responsible for almost 3,000 deaths annually. So that's about 5% of all deaths in the state. You can also draw the line right to 15,000, more than 15,000 cases of pediatric asthma. And so power plants and other stationary sources, they're accounting for about 30% of all Massachusetts air pollution. A lot is coming from things like cars and trucks and these moving vehicles. But while we're working on electrifying the school buses, while we're working on these other things, we also need to work on the stationary sources. And peaker plants, being the dirtiest ones, are where we can target a lot of those efforts. And nothing replaces a peaker plant faster than a battery, because instead of having to turn on that expensive oil burning facility, they can just plug the battery that has been charged, often by solar, and just immediately onto the grid at a far lower cost. And so it's healthier for our environment and healthier for our pocketbook. And we can keep going from there, Becca.
Is it me on this slide?
Sure, go for it.
Okay. Either one of us can talk about it. So I think that we talked about, energy storage is most useful to what it's near, the closer you are, the more that it helps with energy costs, the more that it helps prevent blackouts. Also, in your municipality, typically what will happen when a project is approved in your community, whether that be through a local process or whether that be through the EFSB, which of course will be a lot more of the projects within a couple of weeks. There's typically a host community agreement that is negotiated directly with the municipality that can provide either taxes or a payment in lieu of taxes, as well as a host of other things. So for example, we've been working on a project in Massachusetts in which the community was concerned about the sound wall that was put up. By the way, sound is another thing that has been coming up. I've toured a few of these facilities. Like, that is not number one. They have to comply with any local noise ordinances, number one. So, like, they're not allowed to have noise coming off them that is beyond what is zoned for, what is there right now. Number two, I stood, like 20 feet away, and what the noise is coming from is, like, for example, the HVAC system. It sounds exactly like your own or your neighbors if you have central air and there's that box out back and it sometimes kicks in. That's exactly what it sounds like, because that's exactly what it is. And then people are like, oh, the transformers. So I was at one of these facilities and I was like, I've heard that that's loud. Like, what's the deal? And they're like, oh, it's on. Can't you hear it? And so they like took me over and I was like trying to listen for it. It sounds like my refrigerator in my house. So in some cases, if you have, many of these at once, it may require a sound wall to meet that local noise ordinance. And in this particular project, that's the case. So they're building one. The community had some concerns about that and how it looked. There were some other folks in the community who thought that was a little crazy, because what the project, what is there right now is a decommissioned coal plant that has just been rotting there for the last 10 years, and it's a polluted site. And they were like, this is a huge improvement. But nevertheless, the company decided to respond to those community concerns by moving the sound wall back closer to the batteries and further away from the property line. And then in between the road and that wall is now going to be green space to improve the community. So lots of things that can be negotiated as part of these projects being built that directly benefit your community. And again, I think we've mentioned this a bunch of times of, like, a lot of times when these debates are happening in communities, the conversation ends up being as if the choice is between batteries or not batteries or nothing. And the fact of the matter is, we're going to need to get our power from something. And, we're seeing at the federal level, some other places, a push that the way that we should get more power is more natural gas pipelines, more fossil fuel, expansion of these things. There was a debate in Peabody just like 5 years ago where there was plans to build a peaker plant there, a gas-fired peaker plant, and some folks came in and did a study and said, hey, if we put batteries here instead, we'd save millions of dollars and tens of thousands of tons of air pollution. And unfortunately, Peabody went through with the peaker plant anyway. So really the debate I think that we're having is between batteries or some other way. And so I think that's an important thing for communities to consider, that they are much cleaner, cheaper, and less disruptive than the alternatives. Oh, and this upcoming permitting changes. So starting in 2 weeks, any new proposals over 25 megawatts, which is, let's see, there's a 200 megawatt proposal in Revere that's 40,000 homes. So what's that? A little more than 4,000 homes is 25 megawatts. Anything bigger than that is going to have to get their permits through the State Energy Facilities Siting Board. There's going to be a limit on time for how long they can take to make the decision, which is 15 months. The developer will have to have at least 2 local public engagement meetings before applying, and at least one of the hearings has to be in the locality. between the application and the hearing. I think it's been pretty complicated within the environmental community how folks feel about this and how it's going to work for the communities that these are in. And I too have felt those, that push and pull. I think, being at Greenlight and having gone through a few of these local processes, I I'm feeling more and more strongly that it's going to be a net benefit. And the reason is because it is really difficult, even for us who are spending all day every day, to try to figure out like who is the decision maker here and when are they having a hearing and is it at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday? And like, the project I talked about in Revere, we, even with a research department and with somebody who was in contact with the developer, we went back and forth for like 3 or 4 months trying to figure out, is it the city council who can approve this or is it the mayor? So I feel like, having a very clear process so that those questions are answered and, groups on the ground like 350 and other groups are able to then communicate that to community members in enough time, that they're able to engage in this process, I think will be a net benefit. I think, of course, we will still see differences in power between, wealthy white communities, and some of our environmental justice communities, but I feel that we as organizers will be better able to mitigate that if we can get those answers, and have a predictable process that we can work on bringing them into. So, and we've got like 15 minutes, I think, to take questions. So, Evan, do you want to moderate the questions or do you want us to just take them straight from folks? Whatever you would like is fine with me.
Yeah, think if y'all are comfortable picking on hands, that's fine, and I can hop in as a moderator if we have a bunch of hands go up.
All right. Stephen, I see.
Yes, I'm a bit interested in several things. One question is, can you explain the difference in between the utility scale batteries that you seem to be talking about here that are owned by the electrical utility, I guess, and installed on the grid, and smaller ones that are perhaps owned by, say, an owner of a shopping center or a big box store or even an individual consumer?
Yep. So, so not all of the utility scale are owned directly by the utility. So, um, some of them are, some of them are owned by private generation, and some of them are actually owned by municipalities. So I toured a facility in North Reading that, North Reading has like a electric, like a co-op situation, which I don't even understand all the details of, but that the municipality owns a number of different generating, or no, they don't own it, excuse me. They have a number of different generating facilities. I can only tell you about the batteries is what we're finding here in this answer. They wanted batteries. They wanted it for to bring down the cost when there's peak. There is a gas plant there for that as well. So it's actually great that they have batteries there, that they're available to use. So what they did to get that is that they got proposals and a private developer built it on municipal land. The developer still owns it, and then the municipality contracts with a company that dispatches it for them. So, like, there is a company that figures out when the peaks are going to be and like charges the battery and then like puts that energy onto the grid. So there's like an owner, an operator, and then the municipality that owns the land that it's on and has a power purchase agreement with them. So I guess this is all to say, it is complicated. I think like sometimes we run across things of like, the utilities are a problem in and of themselves. I think that whether batteries are there or not are independent of that because they are often owned by a private company and then there is a power purchase agreement with the utility or with the state or with the municipality. but sometimes they are owned by municipalities. Does that answer the question?
But so very briefly, what's the advantage to the municipality for? Uh, are they leasing this battery, or are they just allowing a company to put it cited somewhere and they have a power purchase agreement? Is that the
It
only
can
benefit for the
it can
community
be
directly?
no, it can be either. So, for example, the proposal in Revere, that power would be sold directly to, the New England power grid, not directly to the municipality of Revere. The benefit to Revere would be number one, they're getting a lot of payment in lieu of taxes. They're in the process of negotiating what other benefits. I know that the company is going to pay to like upgrade the water system and buy the fire department like a special nozzle for their hoses and I don't know what else. There's actually a meeting in 4 days about it in which I'm going to find out more about what the conditions are of what the company's going to buy for, going to give to the municipality. Um, I would also say that in communities like where there is a lot of industrial zone land, unfortunately, tend to be environmental justice communities, then it comes into like what is there now and or what would be there. So like what is there now in Revere is this it's very funny because I've tried to describe where the plot is to people from Revere, and they're like, "Oh, I don't know what you mean." Like, "Oh, it's the north part of the town." And then I was like, "Apparently, it's the place where if you steal a car, that's where you dump it." And they're like, "Oh yeah, that place." So there's like old cars and like waste there right now, and it's polluted. There's similarly, we've been working on a project in Somerset, and that's the place that like what's there right now is like fuel tanks from an old coal plant. So as part of the project being built, the battery developers will clean that up, remediate the site, and put something in that is, not going to emit pollution into that community.
If I could jump in, a lot of the times how we'll talk about, the benefits for a given community is kind of a two-layer cake. So on the first layer, you've got things that are just inherent by nature of using, whether it's batteries, whether it's solar, but a non-polluting energy source. You're going to reduce your air pollution. You're going to probably, have, especially in the case of batteries, you'll have better grid reliability. You'll reduce those blackouts and brownouts that Becca was talking about. Those things are just kind of baked in, like no matter the specific project. And then you look at those specific projects. Oh, there was actually this hugely polluted site that's going to get remediated, or they're making this huge investment in the school district or in the fire department, or there's this big payment in lieu of taxes. We were talking about one facility recently where they were going to become the number two taxpayer in the entire town. And so then people, don't have to worry about my property taxes going up or the school being underfunded as much, because they can have those municipal resources without having to increase taxes. And so that's kind of how we'll talk about that. There's kind of that inherently baked in layer, and then something that might be specific to a given project.
Well, in my town, if I wanted to get a solar array for the town, I know who to contact. I know who the developers are. If I wanted to investigate getting a battery, who would I contact?
I think that you could contact us and we can there's like a whole bunch of different answers to that that I would want to refer to some of our other colleagues to better answer. We work with a bunch of them, but like Greenlight is developer agnostic, right? So like we want the clean energy facilities to be built, and we kind of let the companies fight it out amongst themselves of who's going to build it. But they, I think, would have some referrals for you for that directly if you
Okay,
wanted to
thank you.
email. Yep. Maria, sorry if I'm
Yes. Yeah.
mispronouncing.
So I have a question. The other question was part of it, but I just want to add that cities can also sell the electricity and get money that they use for their residents. A virtual power plant is something that, I want to see more of, and I think there's some legislation about that going on. So, right. So, but then also individuals, well, commercial commercial buildings and individuals could also get batteries. I mean, my brother lives in Florida, so he gets ton of solar, and he doesn't pay any electricity, anything for electricity, which to me is totally amazing. So, I mean, I guess this is more a comment, but I just wondered if you had any more information about if a co-op building wanted to get a battery, or, and the other thing is just that when we get smart meters that you can control the demand, then you also don't have to you can use your battery and not use electricity when there's high demand. So that's another aspect of it. So anything you want to say about if I'm saying something wrong, or, does that make sense?
It does make sense. I think like you're talking about sort of, when I had the grid picture up, the batteries that are like down at the bottom to,
Right, right.
serve a specific facility that has energy needs or wants. And I think like if the question is how do we go about getting that, I think we can fold that into the connection that we're making about how do I with Stephen, I can add in the request to our colleagues, what if they wanted a smaller scale? I tend to know less about the smaller scale just because Greenlight deals primarily with the
Yeah,
larger projects.
right.
But yeah, we definitely like the project that I can't remember if I said this. I toured a project in Dighton that is a combination solar battery and working farm. And that's only I believe 3 and a little megawatts. So is a smaller project than Greenlight would be involved in, but um, the farmer had some health problems, was not physically able to continue farming. His kids didn't want it. He had a proposal from a housing developer. He really didn't want to, but was like seriously considering it. And then this opportunity came along for him to put solar and batteries on there as well. And he has hired a farm manager to continue farming. So yeah, like there are companies, like I met the guy who helped set that up. So happy to do what I can to make those connections.
So once we get those demand, I think we're going to get smart meters. If people can afford it, I don't even know how much it costs. Getting a battery is going to really lower our utility bills, I think. So,
Yeah,
And I think
that's really exciting in this direction. I think, it's a fairly common thing, right? As you were saying, people have heard of that with solar, that if you produce more, sometimes the grid will buy it back from you. But I think there is the opportunity with that with batteries. And even I was just reading this week about a town where their school bus fleet is not being used over the summer, and they've electrified that school bus fleet. And so they're actually using it as a bunch of micro batteries that they've
yes,
basically strung together
right,
over the summer. And so
cool.
I think there's so many, as Becca was saying, we're at Greenlight, we focus more on the big scale of how do we, do what we need to do at a big picture to make the clean energy transition happen. But at the community scale, there's a lot of these really exciting ideas that are going forward too.
Okay, thank
I
you so
also,
much. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, no, that made me think of another thing as far as Stephen's question of like the bigger scale and the benefit. And like, you know, I would love both, like individual places getting more batteries and the utility scale. But one of the things about the utility scale is that it makes those benefits accessible to everybody, even if,
Right,
you're not in a position to be able to do that upgrade for
right.
yourself. You can do it at the community
But the
levels.
municipalities can.
Yep. Yep, definitely. Paul.
Thank you for doing this presentation. I have three small questions, and they're based on one of those container units. Okay, let's say we just had one of those container units. Uh, what is the capacity in kilowatts or megawatts or whatever unit you have? That's the first question. How much do one of those things cost? Is the second question. And what's the life expectancy, either based on how many years or how many charge cycles? So the capacity, cost, and life expectancy of each one of those container units.
Yep.
Thank you.
So it depends quite a bit on like the specific technology and the specific manufacturer. So for example, the project in Somerset was intended to be more containers, but then they looked into a different manufacturer, and that manufacturer made a battery unit that had a higher capacity. And so they were able to modify their plan so they had fewer containers but the same output, with another, manufacturer, another type of lithium ion battery. So it depends, is the answer to that, which is not, I know, necessarily very satisfying. I'm trying to think, and
How
Kory,
about
please jump
just a,
in.
how about just a typical container, an average container full of
Kory,
battery?
do you know the answer off the top of your head? And if not, I can find out on the
If it's like
internet.
a number situation like that, I have one in my head, but I don't know if I trust what's in my head enough to, say that confidently right now. So why don't we maybe we can get that information to Evan and follow up and
Yeah, it shouldn't take long because if I know, like, I have the site plan for Revere and I know the megawatts, so I should be able to find out, a standard answer for you pretty quickly.
but
Um,
to your question
Well,
about life expectancy, I think
oh,
around 10 to 15 years tends to be the average that we're talking about here. But as you noted, it does depend on things like how often it's being charged and so on. So it can be a little bit variable, also based on the technology as well. But that's if we're kind of talking ballparks on average, that's what we'd be talking about.
yeah.
so what about the cost?
I don't know per container. Do you know, Kory?
Yeah, not on a per container basis. That's where we'll yeah follow up with that detail for.
That is a little bit harder to come, across that information just because it is proprietary to the companies of, like, how much they're spending. They spend like tens of millions of dollars on the project, but then, the project is many megawatts. So I will try to find out. But I can't just ask them because they won't tell us how much they're spending.
Well, feel free to email me. Thank you.
Will do.
Thank
Will
you very
do.
much.
Yeah. Jonathan? I guess there's two Jonathans. Jonathan.
Yeah,
Jonathan.
Go
Yeah.
ahead, Jonathan.
okay, thanks, Jonathan. I feel like I'm talking to myself. So yeah, super interesting. I love this. And where do you happen to know, this is very specific, do you happen to know where I could find an answer to whether battery powered train engines and battery powered electrical multi units, that's wagons that power themselves, what the fire hazard is for that? The reason I ask is that's a big debate in or is coming up as a reason not to go to battery powered train engines. So if you know the answer, great. If you have a source that you can connect me to, that would be awesome.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
don't know off the top of my head.
I can commit to that. I can try to find a source for that on you. Yeah, happy to look for that.
All right. And other Jonathan.
So thank you for the presentation. Our little piece of 350 Mass has been paying attention to what's going on in Tewksbury, where there's massive resistance to putting in a battery installation because the right wing has gotten organized and scared the crap out of everybody about a fire. And the community where they're putting it is very relatively densely populated, and there aren't a lot of egresses and all that. And what would watching the Revere firefighters was helpful. It's nice to see the union coming out in favor of something positive like this. But what they basically said was, don't worry, it's just like any other fire, which would probably not calm anybody down. The And that's probably true too. So I mean, I'm not saying, they were probably speaking that they were trying to say it's not more dangerous than other fires. And what I've heard is that there's a lot of new battery technology that is less flammable than lithium ion batteries. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that and what the possibilities are of wiping out the fire problem with new technology.
I
Yeah.
can start on this one, Becca, if you want.
Can I just talk to the Revere thing and then you can do that part? They actually did calm down quite a bit listening to them in the room. One of the city councilors kept bringing up, like, oh, if there's an evacuation, and like they repeatedly were like, we don't evacuate for regular fires. And finally, the one firefighter, like in like the third or fourth time the city councilor brought it up, he was like, there's not going to be an evacuation, no evacuation. So yeah, they actually did calm them down a bit of like the firefighters have it under control. But yes. Okay, go ahead, Kory.
Yeah, and I'll keep it very brief because I know Evan's got some closing things he wants to say. Um, basically, yes, there's a lot of new technology, and we want to see all that technology get developed. I think right now, we see that lithium-ion batteries have some risk, but compared to the alternatives, like I was saying, they are far less risky on a number of calculations. So, there are things like iron flow batteries and other types of batteries that, can have some great potential in terms of how long they can last, how much power they can do. And so we want to keep seeing those get developed, but we do have a good option. It may not be perfect, but we have a good option that can really help us with the clean energy transition in our hands right now. And we don't really have the time to just wish that it was perfect and not use what good we've got right now.
And I think the new technologies too, like, are coming into the proposals. It's just, the economics work and all those other things. And so most of the proposals we're seeing right now are lithium ion, but you are starting to see those other things that you're mentioning, and we're all for that as well. Evan, it's up to you whether we have time for one more question or whether you want to.
I think we'll call it there. Jonathan, you hand still up, but already asked questions. Is that okay? Okay, perfect. And if y'all happen to notice something in the chat you want to respond to, feel free to do so in the chat. First, thank you, Becca and Kory. This is super helpful to hear. I think a lot of folks have heard a lot of things about batteries. It's nice to have an overview like this. If anyone here has additional questions, feel free to reach out to me or Becca and Kory if you want to put your contact in the chat. I think is great. So just a great service y'all are providing, offering just resources and information. We've hit the hour mark, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We'll offer just a few upcoming events in 350 Massland. We have next week on Thursday, so like mark your calendars. This time next week, we're going to have another webinar starting the transportation working group called Solving the Transportation Crisis in Rural Massachusetts. Okay, and I can put the link to that in the chat. Also, just in the spirit of cool things coming up, there's a extreme heat preparedness workshop that's going to be hosted in Boston. If you're in the Boston area, feel free to attend. That is hosted in part by our sister program Crew, Communities Responding to Extreme Weather. So another great place to learn about how to address the climate crisis, keep each other safe, alongside advocating for new technologies. And just a general thing, this summer is the end of our Massachusetts legislative cycle, which is a 2-year cycle. So this is the summer of action. We just had a big march through Boston that was tour themed. In parallel, there was a big rally in Springfield on Wednesday and a big rally in Pittsfield on Wednesday. There will be yet more fun ways to get involved. This is really going to be a very exciting time of year. So if you are someone, I recognize a lot of names and faces here. So some of y'all already know, but if you happen to be new to 350 Mass, please check out our website, come hang out. We have a lot of activism and lobbying and advocacy and all kinds of cool other things to do this summer. If you have any questions for me about 350 Mass, the easiest email to remember is evan@350mass.org, which I just put in the chat. And otherwise, thank you for coming today, and we look forward to hanging out with you later this summer. See y'all.